Gene Trowbridge. I'm going to join you for a cup of coffee this morning. This is my Tuesday morning Facebook post. Every Tuesday at 10:30 Pacific Standard Time, I come on and give you some short piece of very good information. And on Thursday at the same time, my partner Jonathan does his Facebook post. Today, I want to talk about how do you get started in doing an offering. The reason I'm going to talk about that today is I get a lot of phone calls that I consider, and I say that I call them homework calls. People think they're getting ready to be a syndicator. They want to know what's going on. They ask me, how do I get started? What's the procedure? How do we do that? So I thought I'd take a few minutes and share my answer that I give to all of them individually with you. Let's see what we've got here. I have a presentation that I do that's on 10 steps toward doing your first deal. And I've put the first 3 steps up here for you to look at today. One, find someone to do this with. You know, I've interviewed all sorts of syndicators. I don't mean sorts, I mean a large number of syndicators. And I always ask them, what advice do you give to rookies? And they always say, don't do this alone. This is not something you can do by yourself. And I know that. I'm absolutely positive that if I were going to invest with you, I'd say, Mary, it's a good deal. It looks like a good real estate deal. I've got $50,000 that you need to invest, and I'm happy to invest. But Mary, tell me, what happens if something happens to you? That's the number one question every passive investor should ask. You should look at the documents, and you should make sure it's not an individual acting as the managing member, because a lot of things can happen to an individual. Someone could die, but that's the least of it. I've been involved where people have been sued because of something happened in another property that they're manager for, and sued everything, and the manager gets all tied up in that lawsuit. Divorces, injuries. Unfortunately, we had a client once who was skiing in Park City and hit his head on a rock and came out of quadriplegic. How about COVID? Right now, we have 2 managers who are down. They're going to be okay, but they're down with COVID. Who's running things? There are all sorts of ways you can solve this, but the number one way to solve this is there should be 2 people at least 2 people in the managing manager group. Now, not just for continuity, but maybe to help with money raising, maybe to help with investor relations. This is a big business. It's going to be very hard for you to do this by yourself. So that's always the first step. The second step is build your database. So I'm talking about how are we going to get started. You better have some people to call when it's time to raise money. And I usually suggest, I usually suggest that you have a database of 50 people that you think you have a 50% chance of raising $50,000 from. Today, as we're talking, $50,000 is pretty much the standard minimum investment in the offerings that I write. There are some offerings that are $25,000, not too many. And right now I'm writing an offer where it's $250,000. Not many of those, but 50. So if you had 50 people, and you were pretty sure that half of them would invest 50,000 with you, that's 25 people at 50,000. That's $1.25 million that you're pretty sure you're going to be able to get when you ask them for their money. Great. Now go out and find a specific property. Your first syndication, your first many syndications have to be of a specific property. Hey, we're going to buy that apartment building. We're going to buy that self-storage facility. Here's pictures, here's details. That's the easiest way to raise money, is to have a specific offering. And if you combine the fact that you have a team with a database that you think you've got a pretty good chance of raising $1 million or $1.25 million in your first call, then your specific property probably should be a property where your first raise is, $1.5 million, not much more than that. That depends upon where you are in the country, of course. Certain places, properties are more expensive. But one of the very important things you have to do in your first deal is you have to be successful. Your first investors in your first deal are people who are going to invest because of you. They know you, they want to invest in the opportunity you have presented to them. So that's very important. You're not going to get too many people who don't know you investing in your first deal. So you're going to go out, it'll be a relatively small deal. You'll raise the money, you'll close, you'll start running the property. Then the next time people ask you, have you done this before? You can say, hell yes, I have. Once, well, that's okay, once. The problem with starting a deal where all of your close associates invest with you and then not being successful and not even being able to close and turning back all the money to them means that the next time you go and ask them for money, they will invest, but they won't invest right away. They'll say, well, Gene, you didn't do too well raising money the last time. We're in this deal. It's another good deal, but let's see how you do with someone else first, then give me a call. I know that happens. I hear about that. And so your first deal's got to be a success. So you've got a good team, you've got a good database, you find a specific property. Now what? Okay. So how are you going to control that property? That's what you need to do. You need to get some control. Many of my clients use a letter of intent or go right to the purchase and sale agreement. The bigger the property is, the more sophisticated the players are in the transaction, the more likely it is that you'll start with a letter of intent, which spells out all the terms and conditions, and you get a buy-in. The seller signs that, you sign that, turn it over to the attorneys, and then they draft a purchase and sale agreement. Some of the smaller deals won't go through the mechanics of the LOI. They'll just simply go to the purchase and sale agreement. But in any way, you got to have the property control. And then as soon as you control the property, you can call me, call some attorney that's going to do your securities work. We can start working as soon as we know what property it is and some of the terms. You maybe have the package from the listing broker. Maybe you've done some due diligence. You've done some spreadsheets. You've even started on your own property package to give the investors. We need that specific information on the property so we can start writing the documents. Certainly in the documents for a private placement memorandum, there are going to be chunks that are going to be the same in every single document. What are you going to do for dispute resolution? How are you going to handle a liquidity request from the investor? But there's a whole bunch of the paperwork that deals specifically with this property. And so we can't go very far until we get that paperwork. While I'm drafting your securities documents, you can go to your potential investors that you already know. You may have heard me talk about going to investors with whom you have a pre-existing substantive relation. You've got your database. You know these people. You know that they're expecting to hear from you when you get a property. So you can go to your potential investors. And what are you going to go to them with? You're going to go with them with the draft of your investment summary, the draft of your property package. I won't have the documents finished maybe for 3 weeks, but in the meantime, you can tell people, get your checkbook ready, make sure your pen is full of ink, don't spend your money because in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be coming to you and here's the property we're going to be buying. So that's what you can do. You alert your investors. You never raise any money until you get the final paperwork from your attorney. Then you receive your documents from the securities attorney and bright idea, read them. I know that many of my clients get so excited when they get their documents and they know they have investors that are ready to invest that they rush out and and hand the investors the documents, email the investors the documents, and ask the investors for their check. And you know what's going to happen? An investor is going to read the documents, and an investor is going to call you and say, in Article 4, can you explain how the cash distribution is going to be? It'd be a good idea if you've read Article 4. Okay. Some investors won't. They won't read the documents. They're just investing because of you, especially on your second, third, and fourth deal. But wait till you get the engineers and the CPAs and the detail people. They'll read every word. So should you. On another Facebook post I've done, I talked about the mistakes that syndicators make. And one of the biggest mistakes is not reading your documents. Because if you get a question like that from an investor and you can't answer the question because it's obvious to them that you haven't read your documents, that's the end of that investor for you. You just ruined that relationship. Then read the documents. You've already alerted the investors that it's going to happen. You're going to find a property. You're getting the paperwork. Then just go ahead and ask them for money. Just as an aside, we're not advertising unless you're doing a 506C. We're all doing 506Bs. We're working with investors with whom we have a pre-existing relationship, meaning they're in your database before you hire the security attorney, before maybe even you sign the purchase and sale agreement. You're not advertising unless you do it the right way. You can advertise, but you better get advice from your securities attorney on doing that. So, oops, I went too far. So here's what I think you're doing. You're going out, you built a team. Manager LLC is more than one person. Build a team. There's all sorts of things that happen in the group that manages your syndication. This is a big business. You're in charge of other people's money. So build a good team. Then you're going to go out and you're going to build your database, right? All these people who potentially can invest with you. Then you're going to find a specific property. And when you find the specific property, the attorney can form the LLC that will own the property. The attorney will draft the private placement memorandum. The attorney will draft the operating agreement, the subscription agreement. All while that's happening, you're telling these potential investors about the property. You're getting them ready. You're alerting them that as soon as the paperwork's done, you're going to come to them. They're going to write you a check or give them wiring instructions, however you raise your money. You've got the paperwork. You've read the documents. Now you're going to ask the members for their money. You're going to ask them to purchase interest in the LLC. When you've got all your money raised, you close and you go off with a successful syndication. So somewhere in here, your manager LLC with a letter of intent or with a purchase and sale agreement calls the securities attorney, and the securities attorney is going to give you a fee agreement. And most securities attorneys in this space ask for payment upfront. We'll give you a fee agreement. We'll ask you to pay upfront, and we'll get to work and get your documents done for you in 3 or 4 weeks. That's how you get started. Yeah? Get your team together to be the manager, build your database, find a specific property, and then when you get your documents, read them, go out and ask the investors for their money. So once again, this has been Gene Trowbridge on my Tuesday morning at 10:30 Facebook post. If you have any questions, you can email me, Gene at Trowbridge Law Group, and I do my Facebook post on Tuesdays at 10:30 Pacific time. My partner Jonathan does his Facebook post on Thursday, 10:30 Pacific time. And right now we also have a very interesting thing. We're interviewing people who are in the syndication business or want to be in the syndication business. And we're playing those interviews on Thursday at noon Pacific Standard Time via YouTube post. Our YouTube channel is Trowbridge Law. So go to the YouTube channel. We've already done about 20 interviews, and very interesting people in this business. And they'll tell you how to get started, because the last question I ask everyone I interview is, what advice do you have for rookies? So if you're interested in hearing what the successful people say, you can go to my YouTube and you can look at some YouTubes. Thanks a lot for joining us. I'll see you next Tuesday, 10:30 Pacific Standard Time.